Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, we're just going to break down the load components that I'm using for my new Tikka build that is chambered in 7mm Winchester short mag. So, let's get into it. Basically, everything revolves around the brass. Unfortunately for this cartridge, it's very hard to source brass. So, Hornady came out with a new product for 2018, and that is their Hornady 7 WSM brass. Now, I've weighed this across the scale across their 50 pieces, and I wasn't overly impressed. It's within a few grains. These are pretty large cases. There's a lot of brass to them, but it definitely wasn't like all one weight. I think they had a total spread of even like 3 or 4 grains or something like that. Not just tenths, full grains. So the brass could use a little bit more quality control that way. I went through and I deburred the flash holes on them, and then I resized them, full length resize as they were new, because that's what you should do with brass. Now I'm using Hornady die set, and it's actually got a seating die specifically made for the bullet that I'm using. So let's set this down for a second. And the bullet that I'm using from Hornady is their 180 grain ELDM match bullet. I want to shoot this gun extremely far, and this is like best in class 7mm bullet for its weight. I really don't even know if there's a ballistic coefficient that beats this at all, even including the Berger 195 EOL. Now, something to consider with the 7 WSM with a SAMI spec chamber, which I have not bored out the throat in my rifle, which I'm considering doing, but I'm not sure at this moment. Seating depth. So this is a really big, long bullet, and this is a short, fat case. So unfortunately, you have to actually seat this bullet down in there ways. Now let's take a loaded cartridge to compare this. And I believe with this overall length right here, I did my math, and there's like 0.66 inches stuffed down into these cases to get it to the overall length that you need to be. So there's a lot of bullet sitting in there. And it actually comes down below the shoulder of the case, which a lot of people say is not a good cartridge design. Basically, you want the boat tail to sit basically right about there, maybe a little bit below the shoulder, but this one's like significantly down into it like that. All things to consider, but these are the longer 180 grain bullets. These are the heavy for class 7mm. If you drop to like a 168 grain, I'm sure you get a lot of case capacity back, and that really wouldn't be much of an issue for you. One problem with having that much bullet shoved down into the case is that I'm using bulky, slow powders. I had H4831 on hand because it's easy to find, and I actually shot it in my 6.5 Creedmoor. I was very impressed with the standard deviations and the consistency that this powder gives. It was a little slow for 6.5, but you know what? It shot awesome, so it's earned a place at my reloading bench. Talking with one of my buddies, they suggested I get Retumbo for the 7 WSM. He's had a 7mm mag, and they always got really good results with Retumbo. So I went up and picked up a pound, and fortunately with these big fat cases, it wouldn't take long to burn up a pound if it didn't shoot well. These hold about 60 grains. Now keep in mind, I'm used to reloading 223, 243, 6.5 Creedmoor, so 40 grains is really about as much as I had ever reloaded before. And these are up to 60 to 65 grains depending on the powder that you're using. Retumbo, you put a few more grains of powder in there, and it fills it all the way up. 1 grain above their minimum charge was the first charge I loaded with Retumbo, and I was already getting compressed charges. Like when I seat my 75 grain 223 with a full charge of Varmint, you get a little bit of Rice Krispie sound when you seat your bullets in there. That's what Retumbo sounded like with these 180s. Now H4831, which is what these are loaded up with, has a little bit of wiggle room, and it's got a little bit of rattle up in there, but it's really full. It's probably 95% or so. Another bullet that I've got sitting on the bench is this flat base Spitzer point, which seems a little bit odd for me, someone who wants to shoot long range, but I was actually given a few boxes of bullets, and this is one of them. This is a Speer 160 grain flat base Spitzer point. So this would be a good little hunting bullet if I can get it to shoot, and I've got 200 of them on hand, so I'm going to try and load some up and see what they do. The initial charges that I'm trying out are H4831. That's what I've got loaded up there, and then this is all in brand new Hornady brass, so really I'm kind of just fire forming it because factory brass is a little bit smaller than what the reloading dies will actually size it back down to. So you kind of need to fire form it the first time to really start getting into accuracy and load development to get a load dialed in for your rifle. So basically I just need to shoot my brand new brass to get it wire formed out to my chamber so that when I resize it, it comes back down to a consistent size. But it doesn't mean we can't have fun on the first firing anyway. So we're going to do a little bit of load development with that, and if I see promising results for it, then we'll go ahead with that. Now the primer that I've been using for all of this has been CCI number 250 large rifle Magnum primers. The reason I'm using Magnum primers is because this is a pretty stout charge of slow powder, and I really need to get that lit. It's a really wide column of powder, whereas I was thinking about doing a 280 Remington Ackley Improved, and those are very tall, skinny cases. These are short and fat, so I really wanted to get a lot of the powder lit off to help get it going out of there. One of the reasons I went with CCI is simply because I can find CCI. I really wanted to use Federal Gold Medal Match Magnum primers, but I cannot find any on the shelves anywhere in Salt Lake City. And I check all the large stores, the small stores. Unfortunately, I've only come across like 200 in the year and a half that I've been reloading, and I don't want to create a good shooting load with a primer and then have to switch it later and then ruin my load. So I'm just going to start out with CCI 250. Initially, it's giving me good standard deviations with Rotumbo. I haven't shot enough 48-31 to really know yet, but I'm using CCI 250s because I can find them. Now, taking a look at the 7 WSM cartridge design, what I'm really kind of looking at here is kind of its proportions and its shoulder angle. One thing I really like of the WSM over the 7 SOM is this one's got a little more shoulder angle in it. And P.O. Ackley was a famous cartridge designer, and almost everything he ever touched, he increased the shoulder angle to about 40 degrees, and I believe the shoulder angle on these is 35 degrees, so that's almost there. And I don't know if P.O. Ackley would really be able to do much with a cartridge like the 7 WSM. Unfortunately, that was after his time, but another similar cartridge with similar sharp shoulder angle is the 6.5 Creedmoor, and that's what this is right here. This is loaded up with a 140 grain ELD bullet, and if you sit them next to each other, they look fairly similar. One thing I don't like about this cartridge dimensions is the short neck on it. It basically allows a lot of the gases to hit the throat of your bore, and that will lead to short barrel life. The 6.5 Creedmoor, for its size, has a longer neck proportionally than the 7 WSM does. That's one of the reasons people like these, and it helps give you longer barrel life, not necessarily saying that that's what's going to give you the perfect never wearing out barrel. Now here's a little cartridge that is pretty interesting. This one's got a pretty long neck, and it's got a pretty steep shoulder angle on it, and if you guys don't know, this is the new 224 Valkyrie. I'm planning on getting a rifle this summer chambered in 224 Valkyrie, and I have one of them just as comparison. And basically you can see these are inherently accurate designed cartridges. So this little 224 probably got a lot of its inspiration from the 6.5 Creedmoor, and the 6.5 Creedmoor started off as a bench rest cartridge. As the 30 TC, they necked it down to a 6.5, changed the dimensions a little bit. I'm pretty sure that this was kind of taking some design cues from the 6.5 Creedmoor, but I'm not exactly sure who or when they designed the 7 WSM, but it's got a sharp shoulder angle on it, and it's a short little cartridge. I wish that the throat in my rifle was a little bit further out so I could get more of the bullet seated out, and I think I could get more powder in there and more velocity, which is basically what I'm looking for in this 7 WSM. Alright, now I'm going to show you guys a target from my second range trip with the rifle. The first one I went out in the desert, and I actually had an issue with the rifle. Took it back to the gunsmith, we got that resolved. So on the second trip I loaded up just basic cartridges. I loaded them up 1 grain above minimum, and I set them all to the overall length of seating the bullet 15 thousandths off the lands with the 180 grain Hornady ELD. So there's not really any load development going on here, just more or less function testing the rifle and getting an idea if it will shoot these bullets or not. So this first group right here was actually the first real group that I was able to get on paper and shoot with my 7 WSM. Loaded with 66 grains of Retumbo, the 180 ELD, the CCI 250, Hornady one time fired. This was the second firing on this brass. Like I say, the first time I went out and I actually had an issue with the rifle, I did fire 20 rounds through that, and then I reloaded those exact same pieces of brass, and so this is the second time that brass had been fired. So there's 3 shots going into here, and then 4 and 5. A little bit of flyers, but you know what? The barrel still needs to kind of foul up a little bit. Also, I wasn't super comfortable shooting this gun yet. I had lightened the trigger significantly, and it was cold and windy. All great excuses, I know, but I'm not saying that this is exactly how this rifle is always going to shoot. So this one, I've got 6 shots going on over here, and this is with 48-31. I was definitely getting colder at this point, and I was ready to leave the range. Like you can see here, bad shooting, cold, not loading the bipod very well, and I was flinching a bit with the new 7 WSM. As I mentioned, I'm used to shooting 243 and 6.5 Creedmoor, so bumping it up to a 7 WSM, it's definitely got a little more kick to it. Here's a second group of 66 grains of Retumbo. Really not a terrible looking group for some of the first shots out of the gun. And then 59 grains of 48-31. There are 2 shots going into here and the third one over here. So not setting any records or anything, but I'm liking where this is heading. Now I will be getting into low development, and once I get this brass fired, then I've got more to play with. So those are going to be my load components that I'm using in this Tikka build. So that's about it for now. I've got more loaded up, as you can see. I'm going to go out, do some load development, and you guys will get the updates with the targets, and we'll be back to talk about it more. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you guys later.